welcome to Rural Roots, A Road Less Traveled, a podcast by North Country Healthcare.
We're your hosts. I'm Gavin Cook.
And I'm Ren Anderson, and we're so glad you're here. Gavin, Dr. Mark Morgan joins us today. Welcome to Rural Roots, Dr. Morgan.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, of course. Well, Gavin and I did a little pre-research, and we understand that you grew up in the North Country and ultimately chose to build your career here. Can you tell us a little bit about the path that you took to come to North Country Healthcare, and what about practicing medicine in this region made you want to stay?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, geez, it's a long time ago at this point, but yeah, my wife and I both grew up in the area. I was in Lancaster, she was in Jefferson, went to high school together, left to go do college and stuff. And I have to say, we didn't have any expectation or thoughts that we would be returning to the area when we originally left. You know, I lived in Manhattan for 4 years for undergrad. I lived in Boston for 4 years for med school. And then we started a family, and I think that's when our perception changed in terms of, all there is to offer up here. So came back to New Hampshire for residency, and I think definitely saw the appeal of not living in a city when we have young kids, and then by chance, when I was finishing up residency, one of the attendings that I worked with was actually, he kind of routinely came up to weeks every few years to do like a mock inspection for the anesthesia department, and happened to hear that they made a decision to hire an anesthesiologist and just shared that with me. I think other than that, I probably wouldn't have even been considering coming up this way. So yeah, my wife and I just kind of talked about it and said, geez, we have to at least check it out. And yeah, I just had a completely different view of the area and the possibility of having a career up here at that point. And, we're really grateful that we chose that. And, it was great for our kids. And I know for me personally, like being able to work in an area where you actually knew quite a few of the people, which certainly, doesn't happen when you're working in a city somewhere. And that, it's surprising how often it happens that, you're taking care of somebody that you somehow have a tie to, one way or the other. And, just makes it that much more meaningful. So I think that's what brought us back up here. And, I specifically started at Weeks about 20 years ago. And, again, just grateful that we kind of took that turn and came back up. So.
Yeah, it's interesting. I was talking to Tom on an interview for NHPR, and one of the things he said about attracting doctors to the region was making sure that the spouses were taken care of too. I'm curious if you'd share, what does your wife do, and what did your kids like about the area?
Thankfully, she's been willing to re-career many times just based on where, unfortunately, like wherever I was ending up for training kind of dictated where we were going to be. So, so she's done, I guess, many things, but her most recent is she works for Dartmouth, mostly remotely, in their child psych department. She manages programs for them and outreach. So she's not a clinician, but she does the administrative side, and she's always been very flexible in terms of just making it work wherever we ended up. So she did a long stint at the consortium in Littleton, and then she's been at Dartmouth for I don't know, probably approaching 5 years at this point, and yeah, she's always made it work. And the kids, they both ended up at the academy in St. Johnsbury, and that was a great experience for them. They're both art majors, so they're either done college or about to finish, and both in the arts fields. So I can never help them with anything that they need help with. But yeah, so one actually works for Dartmouth. She does graphic design for them, and the other's
Wow.
finishing up college this year. So
That's wonderful. Well, and I just want to briefly go back to you made a comment that you've been here for about 20 years now, and I'm curious what feels the most different about the work when you started 20 years ago to today. I know a lot has changed, but what
yeah.
feels the most different?
Yeah, I mean, the scale and the scope has definitely changed. When I started, it was really just all about anesthesiology and kind of building that service up only at Weeks. And, at the time, Weeks was smaller. I think our whole med staff fit into the hospital boardroom, and, that has grown with time. And then you throw in the affiliation, and yeah, I think just the scale has definitely changed. It's nice to know that many of the providers are still the same. I mean, we've added more, but there's just many that have it's truly they're one place that they're trying to do their entire career, and there's a lot of dedication to the area and to the community.
Well, you've held several leadership roles over the year, and most recently, Chief Medical Officer. What did each of these roles teach you about leadership in particular that you still carry today?
Yeah, great question. I think the main thing that is common through all of them is, mostly the medical staff, the providers, that they want a way to be heard. Like, they want their voices to be heard. Not everybody wants to go into some sort of leadership or administrative position, but they all have, valuable ideas and very valid complaints too at times. And I think a lot of these leadership positions just, I think the key to being effective is being a good listener, and I guess providing a way for them to share those either ideas or concerns, and hopefully feeling like at the end that they're being heard, whether or not we can actually act on them in any timely fashion or at all. But so I think that's been common to probably all of them, and again, it's just mostly the scale that keeps changing.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think you speak to something really important. There's a way to make folks feel listened to and heard and valued that does not necessarily end in immediate action. It might be long time down the road sustained action, but you can still, as a leader, spend time listening, validating, and really being that outlet for folks.
Yeah.
Well, and sorry, Ren, if you want to go, you can.
Go for it.
Okay. Yeah, and I mean, speaking of leadership, I'm curious how, the change from being primarily physician focused in it every day to now being certainly more leadership focused, I can imagine would be a big shift. So can you maybe talk to what was the hardest, kind of change about that shift, and maybe something that came a little more naturally or easier?
Yeah, I think that the hardest part for me personally is just that I went from, when you look at the world of anesthesia, it's a very clear start and end of each day. And you know that you've done a good job. That, you know what your success is. But the administrative leadership part, like the work just never really ends. There's lots of things that you can do that feel like wins, but there's always more to be done. So I think that's been the hardest part, is kind of adjusting to that part where, you just don't get that immediate feedback of, okay, I did this right. But yeah, what was the other part to that question?
Oh, and then just maybe something that, came a little more naturally or easier with the transition.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I mean, I feel like, for the most part, it's, still you're still working with the same people,
Yeah.
whether it's in some clinical capacity versus administrative capacity. So, I've appreciated having that time over the years to, at least build relationships with people. So, that I think has made it easier. So, as far as switching to system CMO, I think, becoming part of cabinet was a big change also. And definitely appreciative of the support I feel in that group, which was really immediate. I mean, I think probably like a lot of people before I joined it, it was kind of a unknown. You hear about them, but you're not there,
Right.
and then just working with them, on a pretty regular basis. It's, they're all very kind, concerned people that are all, doing very big jobs, and at the same time are looking to support each other. So that part has actually been, easier than I expected in terms of just feeling that support.
That's great. And I think one thing you mentioned right there was, the cabinet piece and people not knowing, what happens or what they do. And I think some people may see the title of chief medical officer and say the same. So I'm curious if you could maybe give us a brief look into what a day-to-day looks like for you. I know every day is probably not the same, but what a normal day looks like for you in the CMO
Yeah.
role.
Yeah, I mean, I guess probably similar to the other, administrative positions is just a ton of meetings and lots of email. And I think that defines most days. And
Yeah.
it's, balancing whatever that day's, you know, new crisis is versus the longer term goals of, also trying to accomplish some bigger things. So yeah, I feel like that's probably most of each day. And I, I don't think there's any way to do it all without all of these meetings. Like I think they're just the way that we actually, get things done. But yeah, they make up a majority of the day. Then sprinkled in there is, trying to also be connected with the operating room and what's going on there, and like kind of the stuff outside of the CMO role. But but yeah, I think it's certainly on a daily basis. There's nothing glamorous happening other than a lot of meetings and it dealing with whatever that usually that specific need that comes each day is probably the more satisfying thing to deal with.
Yeah.
Like actually helping someone with something that's you know causing a problem for them at the moment. So yeah, I spend a lot of time on the phone. I mean, I pretty much give my cell phone out to whoever needs it. So I think people are pretty comfortable just reaching out to me. So that's a good chunk of the day too. But some weeks we have a lot of evening board meetings that you know take up some of the time there too. So
Well, Gavin and I have had the pleasure of talking to a lot of our guests about becoming a high reliability organization. And I'm curious how your background as an anesthesiologist, I know a lot of that is very safety focused. So, how does that shape how you think about safety, preparation, and decision making?
yeah, so I mean, yeah, you hit it right on there. I mean, with anesthesia, it's really all about like vigilance, and you of course obviously have a patient who can't speak for themselves, and you therefore have to be the one looking out for them. And I guess it's more obvious in that setting, but And that's really what all our training, goes towards, is keeping that person safe. And then, yeah, if you expand that out to the CMO role or any of the other roles, yeah, I think it's maybe less obvious, but it's still all about, like, instead taking care of that, whatever it is, the patient, the community, like the ones that really, you know, we are the ones thinking about whether they're going to have, a negative outcome or a negative event during their interaction at the hospital, whether that's outpatient or inpatient. And so, it is up to us to really try to minimize errors and, minimize the chances of any of that stuff happening. And I think that's mainly what HRO is about, is, should be that somebody coming to the hospital should, know that they have the lowest possible risk of having something bad happen to them that they possibly could. So.
Right. Yeah.
Well, I'm curious about, kind of the fact that you've been in the physician side and then the leadership side again. It seems to be my questions today. Well, Dr. Morgan, I'm curious how you approach balancing clinical judgment, operational realities, and the human side of care when those things can be in tension at times.
Yeah, that's a tricky one. I guess what comes to mind is probably that was most apparent during COVID, and when we had, really, which was felt kind of new to us, which is we had finite resources, actually, and finite knowledge even on how to, appropriately treat things at the beginning or test. And I think even back then, without us, consciously trying to do high reliability, we were like doing the deference to expertise, and it was getting a group together of those that would, I guess, have the most knowledge to make an informed decision about, how to use a finite resource for an overwhelming need. And I think, we had to do that a few times, and it's not a comfortable place to be, but I guess, we knew better than to have it just be like one person making the decision, or have it based on something that just, really wasn't fair and equitable. So yeah, I can think of it in that respect, and hopefully that kind of answers what you were looking for.
Yeah, it's wonderful.
I'm curious, Dr. Morgan, as you look ahead, what feels the most important for North Country healthcare to get right in the next year?
I think as of like right now, our primary focus is like rebuilding trust with the community. Like it's been, a very, I guess, public couple of months of kind of trying to answer questions that the community has about, the way North Country Healthcare is being run. And, I think we've done all of these listening sessions recently in the community, and that has certainly taught us that, we can do a better job communicating, which is almost always the answer for anything that comes up. And we've gotten like really valuable feedback from the community. The things that seem like are very obvious to us as to why we're doing things, like it isn't obvious once you get outside of, our little bubble. So I think that's, right now that's a primary thing, because, I think we feel like we're doing great work and we all have great intentions, but, we also need to be, more proactive in making sure that is actually shared with outside of our own organization. And yeah, so I think that's really key, because, perception is important, and it's important that we're doing the right thing, but it also need people to know it. So.
Yeah. I'm fascinated how that echoed kind of the leadership value that you had before about being a good listener
Yeah,
and being able to respond as a good listener. So thank you for
yeah,
sharing that.
definitely.
Gavin, I think that it's just about time for your old signature
I think you're right.
question.
I think you're right. Yes, Dr. Morgan, I have developed a question that I ask at the end of every episode to our guests, which is we've gotten a lot of the same answer, which I'm not surprised by at all. I just like everyone's kind of interpretation on it. But the question is, what keeps you coming back, day after day, even on those really tough days? What keeps you coming back to NCH each and every day?
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's really that sense of family, like that, you know, and especially, for me, I've been there long enough, like you really, like, it becomes that second home, and you care about the people, you care about the success of the organization, and, I think that's probably the primary reason that keeps me coming back each day, because, you care about how the place does, and
Yeah.
you all the parts that make it successful are the parts that that the people working there are happy, they feel like they're being listened to, that we're moving in the right direction, and then the bigger things that Tom is always talking about, like he's got to think about the long-term success of all three hospitals, and and I think, yeah, that's probably what keeps me coming back, is just, getting to be, I guess, a part of that, and making sure that each of the hospitals is still there for the community for years to come. So,
That's
Wonderful.
fabulous. And for our last question, I'm just curious, Dr. Morgan, when you think about your own road less traveled, what choices are you most glad you made along the way?
yeah, I mean, I love my profession in terms of anesthesia. Like that has been very fulfilling, and I've just been very grateful, because there's all sorts of, I don't know, it also seems very random sometimes what you happen to get introduced to, and on the right day with the right people, and so I feel like all of those things that eventually led me back to, you know, back to Lancaster and back to the North Country. I'm grateful for those, because I guess there's not a lot of options to come back to the North Country and have a professional career. Like that's it's not a given. So I am really grateful for that, and and hopefully we can keep expanding so that there's just more opportunities for others. Between the residency program and such, that you know, like an area that people might not ever consider coming to, just they could live it for a while and then actually see that there's a
Yeah.
lot to be offered this far north.
Yeah. Yeah, I think Gavin and I are both excited to see the evolution of the residency program,
Very much so.
and I think that kind of North Country hustle that you just described is very relevant to a lot of people across North Country healthcare. But,
Yeah.
all right, Dr. Morgan, thank you so much for your time today, and thanks for joining Gavin and I. Hopefully, it was pretty painless.
No, Les, you guys are great, and thanks for having me. I wish I had a book or an album to plug, but
Next time, next time we're going to be looking for your latest hits. So keep us posted. Gavin, every time I have had a chance to interact with Dr. Morgan, he is so warm and authentic. And I know he joked before we started that he's very quiet spoken, but you can tell that his heart is just fully in what he does.
Absolutely. I've only interacted with him a few times when I've been on site, but every time I've had a great conversation with him, and I truly think he speaks volumes to that whole North Country born and raised.
Mm,
And I just love the way he speaks about the area and why he chose to come back and those kind of that decision process. Because we don't hear about that often from
yeah.
people and how, the detail that goes into each of those decisions. But it's so unique that he, ended up back in his hometown.
Yeah, it's so. I hope that our listeners find it inspiring that you can truly have a rich career in the North Country, and I love it. And it's choosing to raise my daughter in the North Country was a huge reason of why I got involved with North Country Healthcare and seeing that opportunity. And we are, if I'm not mistaken, Gavin, the largest employer in Coos County.
That
So,
we are,
yeah,
yes.
as Dr. Morgan said, we want to keep growing on behalf of our communities. So,
Right. Absolutely. Couldn't have said it better. But speaking of community, I am very excited to introduce our next guest, who is my co-host and is now going to be in the hot seat that I was in last season. So
it's
we will have
true.
you as our next guest. How
Yeah,
excited are you?
I'm so excited. I have avoided it officially as long as I could, but I'm excited. I'm a little bit nervous. I tend to be a little bit more comfortable being the questioner or the facilitator. So, bring your hottest questions, Gavin. Really put
Yeah.
me in the hot seat.
You made me be the guinea pig, so
I
it's
did.
only fair now. But I will tell you, just as a word of advice, we've had people say that they black out when they do our episodes, and they're not wrong because I
Yeah.
don't remember a moment of mine. So just you have that to fall back on, worst case.
Great, great. I will. I'll remember that the blackout is normal. So, well, until then, I'm Ren.
And I'm Gavin, and this is Rural Roots, a road less traveled.